Hi, welcome to the BD Roundtable. We're here today with Mark Gustavsson. Mark is the principal lawyer at Mark Gustavsson and Associates, a boutique corporate and commercial law firm based out of Adelaide, Australia. Now, Mark recently put on his very first paid webinar, so I wanted to talk with him about his motivations for doing this now. How did he go about determining the price and collecting payments? What platforms did he consider and why did he choose the one he went with? And ultimately, what did he learn from doing it this time that he's going to do differently for the next webinar? So if you want to talk with Mark directly or any of us in the legal marketing community at the BD Roundtable, head over to bdroundtable.com. Now here's Mark. Mark, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with us. So can you take a little bit of time to explain kind of who you are, what you're doing, and what sort of law firm you're working with?
Yeah, sure. So I currently operate as a sole practitioner just for my own practice, and I specialize primarily in corporate commercial advisory and commercial and civil litigation. So my background, I've spent a number of years working at larger corporate commercial litigation firms, both in my home city in Adelaide, as well as interstate here in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to take the leap into practice under my own name because what I saw was I worked for traditional firms and I was seeing some opportunity to use strategies for a digital age in legal practice. And I suppose I was a little bit impatient because I didn't want to wait to have to get to partner level to start implementing those strategies. I wanted to see how they run pretty much straight away. So long story short, I ended up getting into practice myself. And that brings me to where I am today. So I've been in practice for about close to 12 months. Client base is slowly growing. And during that time, I've been implementing some forward-thinking strategies like webinars, using legal tech, and just implementing these other kinds of strategies, which I just wanted to see how they run with an idea of just building a business, creating that engagement, delivering that legal service in a way that's maybe more streamlined and more cost efficient for clients. So that's kind of my motivation, a better legal service at the end of the day. And we've been exploring tech and how to do that over the past few months, particularly with webinars. So
right. Now, what was your main reason of doing a webinar now? I mean, was it COVID, or did you use COVID as an excuse to do a webinar, or was this something that you had planned out, well before COVID?
Yeah, look, I think the whole COVID pandemic certainly sped along the decision to run a webinar. But really, my main motivation, wasn't just to run a webinar because that's what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
Which is what it seems to be. It's like everybody wants to run a webinar to show, oh yeah, we're adapting to COVID. I think it's great. I think it's a good first step, but that certainly wasn't my only motivation for this. Background is, in my home state, the Parliament has recently passed some historic and controversial land tax legislation. And it's so controversial and it's so different that a lot of even the preeminent practitioners here in South Australia aren't quite sure how this new land tax regime is going to operate. So in light of this apparent confusion in the marketplace, in light of this apparent confusion with property investors, I said, you know what, I'm going to research these changes myself. I'm going to speak with lawyers, speak with barristers, and I'm going to develop that expertise in myself and then share it online with people to demonstrate my expertise and hopefully get some people asking more questions and go, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to come to him for some land tax advice. So I wanted to build connections with people. I wanted to do it digitally. And that was my motivation, was this legislative change.
Right, right. Yeah, no. So how did you actually, what steps did you take to actually set this up? Because I know, a lot of people research the different platforms and maybe they'll watch a few webinars. They knew, and they've been on a few good ones and they've been on quite a few bad ones. So they know kind of what they're looking for. So can you walk us through your process of how you decided to implement this in your firm?
Yeah, certainly. So I hadn't run on webinar before, ever. And I actually didn't know where to begin. So the first step that I took was was number one, determine what webinar platform I wanted to use. And to share with you what I was thinking, I was really guided by a minimum viable product type thinking, which is that I didn't want to run a perfect webinar. I just wanted to run a webinar. And I didn't even mind if the wheels were falling off it as we went through. I just wanted something which was good, professional, and was a first attempt upon which I could build and refine my ability in the future. So initially I wasn't planning on getting it perfect, and I can tell you it wasn't a perfect webinar. But importantly, I think I learned something in the process. So, and hopefully I can share some of that today with yourself, Daniel and Elizabeth. So first, as I said, first step was to pick a platform. I looked at several platforms. One was ClickFunnels. One was Demio, Demio, and then one was Zoom. Within Zoom, I had two options. There was the Zoom meeting option, and there was the Zoom webinar option, which was a premium service. I think from memory, Zoom meeting runs approximately 20 Australian dollars a month. Zoom webinar is about 80 Australian dollars a month. So I really kept myself looking at those four different offerings. And I ended up settling on Zoom because Demio and ClickFunnels did seem to provide good webinar functionality. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to run with something that I was familiar with.
Right,
So I
exactly.
didn't want to, I know that ClickFunnels is a little bit of a learning curve on it. And for Demio, the same, there was a little bit of a learning curve. So I think for people who are keen to explore the world of subdomains and linking web pages to web pages, I think ClickFunnels is a good place to play. If you're wanting to keep it a little bit more simple, I would definitely err towards the Demio or Zoom offering. And as I said, myself personally, I ran Zoom, and that seemed to run fairly successfully.
Right. So with ClickFunnels, what were some of the features that you liked? Because they're able to host the RSVP and the signups and all of that, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I liked about ClickFunnels was that it allows you to actually click and drag drop a web page, like a registration web page. So you can click and drop register now buttons. You can click and drop your graphics. You can click and drop countdown timers, and you can click and drop a sales copy, like text boxes where you can actually put your copy and sell your webinar. So I actually set myself up a webinar page on ClickFunnels, and it looked nice, it looked sexy. It kind of ticked a lot of the psychological sales boxes that you might want to tick in a webinar registration page. But I just ended up not running with it. Um, there was a lot. I felt like there was a lot to learn, and I didn't. I ended up prioritizing again a simpler service. But certainly one of the big ones about ClickFunnels is that ability to have that registration page to actually integrate it with your mail service, your MailChimp, your HubSpot, to integrate it with PayPal or Stripe or your other payment servers, and to essentially set and forget your registration page and have it sort of sitting there collecting leads.
Right.
You'd want to promote it with Facebook ads, or you'd want to promote it somehow, organically push it through your social networks on social media. But if you can get it up and running, it seems to be a good strategy for automating the lead generation process to a very large degree.
Okay, so but for your first webinar, you wanted to go with a platform that you kind of knew was a bit easier to use, and you knew other people were familiar using it. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned that this was a paid webinar. So how did you decide on doing your first webinar as a paid webinar? Because I know that kind of scares a lot of people. And some lawyers may think, oh, well, I'm not going to do a paid webinar. I want as many people to join as possible. So what were your thoughts about the pricing and how to set that up? And were you worried that people would attend?
Yeah, yeah. Look, very good question. But my thinking was that I really wanted to communicate to my target audience that this webinar is going to have some value in it. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand the land tax changes, and I came up with some general strategies that land property owners could use. I wanted to give them some general advice for how they might want to consider structuring their property holdings in the future. So I put a lot of thought and time into this, and I didn't want my webinar to come up in a sea of other free webinars, because I felt like I was undercutting myself and maybe undervaluing and underselling what it is that I wanted to sell through my webinar. So I ended up settling on a nominal fee of about 15 Australian dollars, which would, I'm not sure the exchange rate, but probably maybe 20, 21, 22 US dollars. And it was just a nominal fee. I didn't want to charge $50, $60 like I've seen some webinars on, but I just wanted a nominal fee to say, hey, this is a serious webinar. We're going to go through the legislation in detail, or in overview in detail, and I'm going to give you guys some strategies you can take away with today. So, and that's the value, was the strategies that I was giving people. And certainly I gave them a bit of a kick in the butt to say, hey, go speak to your lawyer, go speak to your accountant if you haven't already. And I didn't want to do that through a free offering, because I just get the feeling that a lot of, I didn't want it to be like a sales funnel. I didn't want it to come across as a sales funnel. That's what it was. But I didn't want to give that impression that, come in for free and we're gonna hit you on the backside with a promotion. I really wanted that to be that upfront, like.
That's right. That's right.
I wanted to communicate that upfront.
That's excellent. I think that's a really good approach, because I can't tell you how many webinars I've actually signed up. And then it comes, and the day comes up, and I'm like, I have other things to do. So, having that little bit of pricing to show that this is a sort of a premium webinar, you're going to get actual value from it. And yeah, it really does set you apart, and no need to do any of the sales talk that you get on a lot of these other webinars.
Exactly right. And it had the added benefit too that the attendees that did come in, they were super warm for me, and largely qualified already, because here I had I think 11 attendees at the end of the day, and I knew that gee, these attendees had forked out money and are serious about hearing what it is that I'm going to share. So I knew that they were warm already. So it helped me understand and create a little pool of people who, we're just ready and ready to receive the advice from the webinar.
Well, it puts a little bit of pressure on you as well to actually deliver on that promise, because people are paying money to hear you speak. So ahead of the webinar, talk us through like the 24 hours before the webinar went on. So you've advertised the webinar on your social media channels. Any other channels that you use to advertise this on?
No, so I just did pure organic marketing, meaning we post it on Facebook, we post it on LinkedIn. I have a small network of colleagues here in SA, and we support each other, we cross promote each other, and I had the benefit of that network also pushing the webinar out. So I didn't invest in any paid ads. I didn't invest in Google ads, Facebook ads, or anything like that. I just organic search, organic promotion.
Well, since it's a paid webinar, how did you manage the processing of that? I mean, was that in the RSVP?
Okay, so what I did was I ended up stacking Eventbrite and Zoom together. So Eventbrite provided me my payment processing ability, and then Eventbrite natively integrates with Zoom so that people could access Zoom through Eventbrite, as in pay for the ticket, and then boom, the Zoom link is there.
Right. Okay, so that makes it really easy. What percentage of that fee did Eventbrite take, if you remember?
I think Eventbrite charges. I can't think of it as a percentage, but I think it's about $1 to $2 on a $15 ticket. So I actually added that on top of the ticket price. So my attendees were paying maybe $16.50 or $16.75, and that cream off the top would go to Eventbrite, and then $15 per ticket was in my pocket.
Okay.
As a bit of an FYI, Eventbrite allows you to set whether you want that fee to come out of the ticket price or be added to the ticket price.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want your attendees to be paying a set fee without fees added, you can set that. Similarly, if you don't mind your attendees paying a little bit extra on the ticket price, you can set Eventbrite up like that as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, I have a few more technical questions, which I'll save for the Q&A for the BD Roundtable members. So the day of the webinar, you're quite nervous getting ready. You have all these RSVPs. So what was going through your head as you actually hit the record button? And what sort of checks did you do? Any wheels fall off while you're presenting? So walk us through that day.
Yeah, look, we certainly had some issues with on the day because it was our first webinar, and because myself and my team was sort of having a little bit of trouble learning the operational back office side of it. We ended up getting 2 different links sent out to our attendees. So some of them had the Eventbrite link, some of them had a Zoom link, and some of them, as a result, weren't getting straight into the Zoom room, and that was confusing them. So we, like in the hour preceding the webinar, we just did another email blast and said to all of our attendees, "Hey guys, this is definitely the link." We triple checked it before we sent it this time, and we said, "This is definitely the link. Click here," and it was the link to the Zoom room. So we really wanted to make it as easy as we can for the attendees. We wanted to minimize the clicks that they needed to expend in getting into the webinar. And we found that the easiest way to do this was just to email the attendees with the copy of the Zoom link. And we got their emails from Eventbrite, from Zoom, because those emails are kept in those platforms respectively.
Yeah, as a participant, I can I know how that goes because I've been on a few different Eventbrite webinars, and it is quite confusing because they send you an email with a confirmation, but then there's no Zoom or webinar link, and then
exactly, yeah.
Am I in or not? So yeah, I think it's a very good piece of advice for you. One, as a producer of the webinar, to quadruple check the links, and then just send the emails the day before, the day of, and maybe like a last minute reminder email. And that can all be automated through MailChimp or whatever mailing system you're using. So you just sort of set it and forget it. Now, correct. During the webinar, what sort of interaction did you have with the participants? Well, first, how many people did join the webinar, and how did you interact with them through Zoom webinar?
Yeah. So we had I think 16 registrations, and of the 16 registrations, 11 attended. The way that we ran it, so we were using Zoom Webinar. Zoom Webinar is a little bit different from Zoom Meeting in that Zoom Webinar isn't really designed for like the gallery view in the same way Zoom Meeting is. So in Zoom Meeting, you can sort of see everyone, you can speak to them. It's a little bit more human. You know, you feel like you can actually talk to someone. Zoom Webinar, we didn't have that. It was just my screen and I couldn't see the attendees. Right. That's why we ended up going back to Zoom Meeting, or we will be going back to Zoom Meeting. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I had to figure out a way to create that engagement with an audience I couldn't see. So what I did was I utilized the chat function within Zoom heavily, and at regular stages throughout my webinar, I just took a pause and said, is everyone on board? Does everyone have any questions at this point? And does anyone want to raise anything through the chat box? And I'd pause, I'd get some questions in, and I could, through those questions, determine where my audience was at. I could determine whether they were up to speed with where I was, or whether, you know, I'd gone too far ahead or I'd gone too fast. So I was really careful to really pace the audience through it and take those regular breaks just to say, any questions, any thoughts? Is there anything you want me to cover again or recover? So utilize the chat box, and if you've got Zoom Meeting, certainly utilize mics. You know, ask questions of your audience. Throw the content back at your audience. Ask them to contribute their thoughts. It will really help, and it will create that engagement in a big way.
Right, that's a good point. And as you talk about that engagement during the meeting, did you do any engagement with participants or registrants before the meeting? Did you send any polls or questions?
There is the function to do it through Zoom, I know, and you can certainly send poll questions during the webinar. You can certainly send content through your mail service before the webinar, but myself in this case, I didn't utilize any of that functionality. All of my engagement was during the webinar, followed by an email in which I provided my attendees some useful resources. So it was engagement during and post webinar, but nothing pre. That was just a stylistic preference, though. It's certainly an option open and available to anyone.
Yeah. So okay. So now you're wrapping up the webinar. You're saying goodbye. What are the steps you took right when the webinar ended? And walk us through the post-webinar experience.
Yeah. So the post-webinar sort of wrap up really had two components to it. The first component was delivering resources to the attendees, like my PDF slides and some other notes. And then the second component was capturing my leads from Eventbrite and Zoom and making sure they're picked up in my email marketing service. So in other words, the second component was making sure that my mailing list was built as a result of the webinar. The way I did both of those was as follows. For the first component, I just jumped into my MailChimp account. I drafted a quick email, PDF linked the resources through MailChimp. I won't cover how to do that in this webinar because that's more of a MailChimp tech issue, but I linked my resources in my MailChimp webinar, so my MailChimp template email, and then I grabbed the emails from my Eventbrite page, from my Zoom page, and just whacked them in MailChimp for a guided, directed email blast just to the attendees. So that was the first component. That was making sure attendees got the resources they needed. Second component, and this is probably the really key one, which I actually almost forgot. And this is probably like the most key out of anything you do for a webinar, which was making sure that your mailing list is built as a result of the webinar. So I had an Eventbrite page, which was collecting registrations, and I had a Zoom page that was collecting registrations. Eventbrite collects the emails and puts them in like your Eventbrite back office as does Zoom. Zoom collects the emails from attendees, puts them in the Zoom back office. Now, because I didn't have any like Zapier integration or even native integration between Zoom and Eventbrite and MailChimp, I had to go at the end of my webinar into my Zoom account, copy the emails from Zoom, and then paste them into my marketing database. Same with Eventbrite. I had to go into Eventbrite. I had to copy the email addresses of the attendees and then put them in my MailChimp. That way, I know that they're added to my mailing list as it goes out regularly. But I almost forgot that. So, which would have almost rendered, it would have affected the effectiveness of my webinar, because then I would have lost all those potential leads from my marketing database. So, one key, I think, if I can really drive it home, is when you run a webinar, make sure that the leads you create from the webinar are picked up in your mailing service. There are ways to automate it. Zapier is a good third-party integration app. There may even be ways to do it automatically between MailChimp and Eventbrite and Zoom. I don't know. There could be native integration there that I just missed and I'm not across. But failing any automatic integrations, make sure you at least manually transfer them over. That way, people who attend can be put on your mailing list and they can be put in line and put into your marketing funnel, just like all your other mailing list prospects.
Yeah, that seems to be a key issue for all these sort of events. Even just a typical standard event, you have all these business cards and event registrations, and just sort of figuring out how to mesh that into your CRM system. So I guess this webinar was a success, right? You consider it a success, and then you're looking to do a next one, right? So what's something that you're certainly not going to do again? And what are the sort of learnings that you've taken away that you'll implement on the next webinar?
Yeah, look, I think it certainly was a success, and it wasn't a perfect run, but as I said, I wasn't looking for a perfect run. I was just looking for a good first run, and I certainly felt like we achieved that. And it wasn't perfect. Wrong link got sent out. Attendees were having difficulty accessing the Zoom through Eventbrite, so it's kind of like it was like, oh my god, this is not working. It felt like at times, but it did work, and the attendees that did get in were very happy. The 11 attendees that were in were very happy. So, so personally, I think next time I run a webinar, I'm just going to run it in Zoom meeting, not in Zoom webinar. I like having faces on my screen to talk with. I think Zoom meeting facilitates that more intimate, close engagement with smaller groups of people. I think that's it more so than Zoom webinar. So I'll be using Zoom meeting next time. I think I'll run maybe I'll test run maybe a few ads on Facebook. Maybe I'll boost a post or two as the second thing I'd probably do. And as a third thing, I'm going to look into how I can automate the lead transferal from my Zoom over to my CRM or my email marketing.
Yeah,
so that would be the third thing I'd look into.
Right.
But really, I think the best advice I could probably give is just bring it together as best you can, and learn through that process. Like there will be things that you get straight away. There'll be things that you don't get, but just do your best. Pick a service, run the webinar as best you can, and even if it's only a half success, it's better than not having run one at all, and then you'll build on it for the next time.
Exactly.
So that would probably be, that's the key advice. Just give it a mighty go, and learn from what happens.
That's great. That's great. No, I'm super glad it was a good success, and you've taken the lead and just gone ahead and jumped into the deep end and go ahead and do the webinar. Now, members of the BD Roundtable will be able to access you directly through our private Slack group. But for non-BD Roundtable members, how can we get in touch with you and learn about Australian tax law, and where can we get in touch?
Yeah, look, My website is currently under construction, so the best way to get in touch with me is probably just by my email address. Email, I could probably drop that in the chat or the group, but
Yeah, I'll link it in
as an
the
FYI,
description.
yeah, just pop it in the description. Drop me an email. I'm happy for any BD roundtable members or non-BD roundtable members to reach out. Drop me an email, even if it's just have a sounding board session to talk about things, law firm related or otherwise. We'll always make time for that. So yeah, look, I'll drop you my email, Will, which you already have. Drop it wherever you need, and please feel free to reach out anytime and touch base. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So if you want to search me up on LinkedIn, I'll be very happy to receive any connection requests to stay in touch and in contact.
All right, sounds good. I'll add all those into the description. So thanks for sharing your experience with us. So now we're going to transition into the live Q&A session with the BD Roundtable members. So if you're not yet a BD Roundtable member, please go to bdroundtable.com and sign up to learn how to join these sessions.